Welcome to the Art of the Game podcast. We are back for season 2. I'm Cass, and here for the ride are my co-hosts and co-founders, Reese and Ryan.
We started this podcast off the back of our business, Sport Design Australia, with the purpose of exploring the intersection of the sporting and creative industries. We wanted to bring you the biggest names in sports design and content excellence.
Our guests this season are providing us with perspectives from all across the world, giving us insight into the artistry behind content and how it influences every aspect of the game. Whether you are a sports enthusiast, a designer, or a creator, Art of the Game will have something for you.
All right. Welcome to the next episode of Art of the Game podcast. We are introducing our guest all the way from the United States, Alex Kopilow. He has a background in sports, building himself as an expert across sponsored content. You might have seen him and heard of his weekly musings in the SponCon newsletter, which we love here at Sport Design Australia. And if you're not subscribed to it, get yourself over to LinkedIn and give it a look. Alex has had experience working across the Chicago White Sox, Madison Square Garden, and now the Arena Group. So Alex, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. A huge fan of your newsletter as well. So really glad to have a conversation today.
Love that. We love a little bit of mutual love in the sports industry. It's it's not a big industry, but it's good to see people doing really great work. So we appreciate you and thank you for sharing all of your unreal insider knowledge. It nearly feels like a bit of a cheat book. So if people who are working in sport and sponsored content aren't following you, they're just missing a lot. We gave you a little bit of an intro, but it'd be great to hear a bit about your experience in your own words and how you've got to be where you are today.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, it's been a long, winding road. So I've had like 3 main phases of my career. I began as a local sports anchor reporter for 5 to 6 years to start my career. So reporting, shooting, writing, editing stories on local news. And that's where my career began. And, got to combine my love of sports and trying to do some storytelling around local sports. And did that for a while in the age where social media was really just starting to explode. Instagram just started. Twitter was just getting off the ground. So there wasn't much by way of social media, but that was how we started to need to reach an audience because local TV ratings were going down. And so that really helped us reach our audience. So that was kind of my first endeavor into social media and digital marketing, but I spent the middle phase of my career, moved back into major cities, got to Chicago, where my wife is from, and worked in agencies for the next few years. So learned everything from organic social media, paid media, creator marketing, 360 strategy for brands like McDonald's and the McDonald's All-American Games. So really got what I consider my graduate degree in digital marketing by way of agencies. And then this most recent phase of my career, I've been focused on digital partnerships in sports. So really launching and leading programs for the Chicago White Sox, for the Knicks and Rangers at MSG, and now working for the Arena Group with the goal of really how do we reach our clients' business objectives while also trying to maintain the sanctity of our social and digital channels. That's social media, website, app, email, what have you. If it's Web3, if it's anything digital, how do we solve business goals and also maintain the strong engaged audiences that we have on our digital channels at the same time so that everybody wins.
Yeah, great. I love that you started as a news anchor. Where were you a news anchor at?
Yeah, I started in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, went to Southwest Oklahoma and Lawton after that, trekked up to the Hudson Valley in New York by West Point, where Army is, following Oklahoma. And then I finished up my career in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I was down there up until January of 2017 and then made the career switch.
That's so cool. We'd love you to share some of your clips. We'd love to see some of that.
They're on YouTube. Whether I like it or not, everything's on YouTube. You can see my whole sports reporter demo. So it's all out there in public. The goal every day was actually don't get on YouTube at the time. So if you mess up, you don't want to be the next boom goes the dynamite. That was the goal.
Yeah. We know a little bit about not wanting to get in the media. We both worked at the NRL, and that was the goal, was don't get on the back page of the newspaper. or don't get on the publication social channels because you know you've done something wrong. Do you want to give us a bit of a insight into how you came to build SponCon Sports?
Yeah. So, sadly was laid off from MSG in September. So I was kind of on the hunt for something new. And the good news was at the start of 2023 in January, I had just kind of made a commitment to myself that I was going to write regularly on LinkedIn, at least 3 days a week, about just what inspired me, right? What about sponsored content in sports really stood out to me, the techniques, who was doing things really well, what could be improved, just my general thoughts. So I had gotten into a pretty good groove and a routine of writing about the topic. And then one of your last guests, I was speaking to Neil Horowitz, and he recommended, hey, you're already doing most of the work. Why don't you just make it into a newsletter? And so, he really helped me a lot in terms of keeping me accountable on, hey, when is it launching? What is it going to look like? Who's the target audience? Really helping me build that and think it through, but also making sure I didn't get lost in the sauce of just like over analyzing and finally just getting it launched. So I launched it in October. We've got a subscriber base of about 1,500 people now. And the whole goal of it really is to inspire others, celebrate what's best in class in the industry, and just kind of bring people behind the hood of how you can monetize your digital channels and really make a huge impact for sports organizations. Because honestly, it's a place in the industry that's highly neglected. It's treated as a throw-in. So I just want to help teach people how you can maximize it and really help the bottom line.
Big shout out to Neil Horowitz. He is everywhere in the US sports world.
Huge. Big follow too. I highly recommend it if anybody needs a good follow in the sports industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, like, in starting SponCon Sports, what has it opened up any doors that you didn't expect? Has it led you down any paths you didn't expect? Have you met people you didn't expect?
100%. It's opened up a bunch of doors. I mean, I work for the Arena Group now. I got that job because of the newsletter. I knew someone over there. They sent my newsletter over to the hiring manager, and that's what got me work. So that's what kind of got me off the bench and helped me in that regard. But then also just meeting a ton of amazing people. I mean, I've met the COO of John Boy and the chief brand officer of Dude Perfect. I was on the phone with someone from the NHL today, and last week someone from Juventus, right? It is insane how global the audience is, how many people are interested in the topic. And it may seem like it's a niche topic, but everybody cares about it. Everybody wants to get better. And honestly, everybody goes through the same issues. So what I tell a lot of people when I hop on the phone with them, whether there's conflicts between departments or they just don't understand how to get it going or maximize digital channels, it's these problems have been solved. They're solvable. Everybody can do it. It's just about kind of having the right processes and tools in place.
Alex, we just love that you're able to simplify, the complexity around commercial content. I think for us, as Ryan mentioned before, we use your stuff as like literally a little bit of a cheat book over here to be able to explain to organizations and teams how they can actually commercialize better and what they're kind of missing out on by not doing the things that you're kind of heroing across the American sports market and beyond. How are you finding all of the instances and examples? Are you out there hunting them all yourself, or do you have a little network of people that are kind of bringing the ideas to you? I guess how are you feeling that every week? Because we've got a newsletter ourselves, and trying to fill and find content is obviously sometimes challenging when you're trying to be relevant and exciting to a market every week. But it'd be really great to hear how your process in terms of finding the inspiration and finding the ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I can't lie. It's a lot of work. I think I put about 10 hours into the newsletter each week outside of work. So it's almost a second job. But I've kind of written about this before too. So feel free, anybody who wants to steal some of these processes. But I've created secondary social accounts on every major social platform. So I spend time every single day. I have followed as many professional sports organizations globally as possible across these channels. So primarily, I'll go into Instagram. I'll click through every single Instagram story, screenshotting, screen recording, anything that captures my attention. And it's not just a really cool concept. It might be a technique. It's, hey, I really like how they use the engagement sticker here, or hey, it's how you played with a native function on this example. So really looking for that. I'll click through every single story, and then I'll swipe the feed for a good, 10 to 15 minutes, just whatever feels right, but want to make sure I get deep in there since I'm following so many different accounts and making sure I'm actively using that save button. The same can be said on X. I'm doing the same thing, really scrolling the feeds a couple times a day, just trying to see what comes up. And then, of course, there's people in the industry who just share things that I will save thereafter. But I'm also trying to avoid, working in social. It's like, what has already been discussed? What has already kind of been taken down in depth? I think I want to make sure I'm really trying to provide value for everybody. So that's like the big ways. It's just like really looking through that. And then on LinkedIn as well, there's an active sports industry community there. And so what people are sharing, the behind the scenes stories, like I use a section at the end to link to stories in the industry. And instead of leaning on a lot of news articles, like I really try to lean on the community that's actively sharing insights and credit them. So that's where I'm looking for a lot of the parts of the bottom section as well as natively on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's so great. I guess it'd be good to get a quick understanding from you when you say you're trying to, showcase things that haven't been shown before. What are you seeing in terms of the trends of what sporting organisations are looking to commercialise? Because, we're used to the typical full-time pose, logo slapped examples. But we know through your newsletter as well, we're seeing a lot more in the engagement side around game day on stories and other formats, engagement stickers, and new people using the native tools a whole lot more. Through your research, and what are you seeing as like kind of what people are leaning into more from a commercialization point of view that potentially we aren't tapping into in the Australian market as much as we should?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. I mean, generally speaking, I think what the American market does better than most markets is they're really maximizing the easy stuff. So even when you talk about full-time, halftime, pregame warm-ups, things like that revenue is maximized. Like you are seeing sponsorship as much as possible on all the things you're going to be doing. And quite frankly, while it's not as sexy, or it might not be at first glance, like that's exactly what the audience wants, right? That's what they're expecting us to deliver. It's one of the most important things in sponsored content is matching the expectations of when the audience hits the follow button, right? They don't want to hear about the latest and greatest sale of your partner. They really want to hear about what's going on with the team. So the more you can lean into that, the better. So the Americans do that really well. But I would say like globally, what other teams do really well is really capitalizing in those big moments, those partnership announcements. But in terms of your question and where should we be looking moving forward is kind of a blend of the two. How can we fit the content with what the brand is actually doing so that you remember the brand? Like it makes sense. Like you're not just on a full-time post just to be there. Like what is a brand that makes sense for that? So for example, Man City and Nexen Tire, right? You see them posting when they arrive to the stadium, but they pull up in their team bus and the bus is branded with Nexen Tire. And just like arrivals and being part of a tire company and seeing their branded bus come in naturally. You don't have to add in any gross graphics over the top and make it feel like an ad. Like they're naturally showing up. It's something that fans want to see. And, Man City is delivering on that.
Yeah, I love that. Firstly, the point that you made around, maximizing the easy, maximizing the simple, like your stuff you're already doing. We definitely echo that, and we definitely try and make sure that that's core in what we're talking to our partners about. It's like, what is the low hanging fruit? What are you already doing? How do you align a partnership to that? So yeah, again, it's not all of the sexy stuff. But I think sexy is obviously where people want to show a point of difference. They want to be, first in market. They want to be doing something that someone else isn't doing. So whilst there is an element of maximizing the easy, it feels like boring in some instances, and it feels like everyone's doing it. So I think tick, let's do that part. But then I think there's definitely a need for the Australian sporting industry specifically to try and think a bit more sexy and try and be a bit more integrated, and try and be a bit more, innovative in the way that they can sponsor. And there's definitely examples of that happening in the US market that we see through your content. So again, thanks for sharing, because it definitely helps us along the way.
100%. No, and that's not to discredit wanting more integration. I think that's really important. Teams shy away when brands ask for more integration. They think they're looking for ads. They think they want their partner front and center, but there's too many success stories to ignore that. You can integrate product. It's just like, how are you bridging the creative gap to align it with the right moment, right? A perfect example of this is Wrexham with their HP contract printer, right? Like, they are taking player signings and they said, we're going to announce our signings by printing out the contracts and using video of that, by showing an HP printer print out a player's contract, right? We just saw that happen in the last few days. I mean, they've done it 2 to 3 times now. It wasn't just a one-off. So Wrexham, who I think many people would say, oh, they've got Rob and Ryan as owners, they're leaning on the celebrity of them to create such great branded content. No, they have great creativity. They put this printer at the center of contract signings, and that's how they're announcing it, right? So now you found a way to put a printer in sports content in a way that's relevant to fans. So I think when people are really looking for that integration, that is the perfect way to think about it.
Absolutely.
That's a really good example. Kind of leads to a question that I don't think really gets asked a whole lot, or we don't really talk about it, at least here in Australia, which is we obviously speak a lot about the rights holders and what their job is in creating great sponsored content, and how they go about kind of building that integration with the brand and building that relationship as well, so that fans kind of come to expect and then trust that brand as well, through that integration. What about the flip side? What can brands who are part of these sponsored pieces of content, who are building these relationships with rights holders, what could they be doing more of on their own channels to kind of further develop that audience trust and further develop that integration with the rights holders?
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, one, being upfront in the pitch process about what it is that they're trying to achieve, right? And this is a little bit part on the team, part on the brand, but what are your goals, right? Are we looking for awareness? Are we looking for engagement, driving traffic, driving leads? Like, what is it that we want to achieve? How are we going to measure that success? And really being understanding of the fact that not every tactic will achieve every goal, right? We really need to think as objective-based marketers and making sure that what is being supplied to them is achieving a specific goal, and we can align on the way that it's measured, because that's going to kind of lead us to what is recommended. I think that's a big piece. So clarity on what it is that you're trying to achieve. I think that's a really big piece. Another piece is, if the rights holder has proved they can create killer content, like, I'd recommend this if it's a right holder working with a creator or a brand working with a rights holder, right? It's really about letting the chef cook, right? It's all about the brands trusting these teams that create amazing content to go and do what they do best, right? If you're the Boston Celtics, who've come off an amazing season of creating content, whether it's sponsored or unsponsored, they're going to deliver best-in-class opportunities for partners. So if they trust them in doing that, that's also going to really help as well. But also, again, goes back to the clarity off the top of what you're trying to achieve, to give your team the guardrails and understand what it is they need to deliver for you.
Yeah, that's great. And we couldn't agree more, like working across, being a rights holder, but then also myself working in publishing. You see brands just trying to strangle the content, and it kind of just squeezes all of the creativity out of it. And what you end up with is really a piece of content that's shit, that the audience doesn't want, that doesn't work. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle. What I've seen anyway is you recommend a really great piece of content that is going to work with your audience, and then the brand is like, well, actually, no, this doesn't really align with our brand guidelines, or it's a little bit edgy, or we need more brand slapped in there, or we need to see our logo 48 more times. And the creative team pushes back and says it's not going to work. And then it goes out meeting the alignment of the brand, and then it doesn't work. but it never seems to improve. It just kind of goes back to the start again, and you go through the same vicious cycle.
Yeah, the big thing is your social audience is like a modern sports fan, right? Modern sports fans are much smarter these days. The access to information, the access to data, right? They want more on the analytics front. Same with your social audience. Like they're going to sniff out bad sponsored content right away. They're going to see it's an ad and they're going to scroll right past. Like it just doesn't help anyone. So there are some things you can do. And I think the biggest thing that really helps by way of monetizing your digital channels is for the rights holder to provide upfront every single detail of how something is going to be activated, right? What channels is it going to be activated on? How is the brand going to be integrated, right? Is it just a logo? Is it an end slate? Will product be integrated? How many times is it going to run? The difference between the total posts versus the total occurrences, right? If I run a series that has 10 occurrences, there might be 30 posts if it runs across 3 channels. You need to make that clear in the upfront. By making all these details clear from out of the gate, that's going to make things easier on the back end, because I think that's what causes the issues between content and partnerships in the first place. There is a ton of confusion around how to activate. The brand starts to get more power for that lack of information, and then your vision doesn't come to life as it should. It ends up looking more like an ad.
Yeah.
That is some beautiful tips there. Love that. I'm going to clip that one right up.
Little nugget there. Alex, I'd love to ask you a bit about, what are brands asking of sporting organizations and teams when they're coming to them, as a commercial partner. I think, the beauty of commercializing sport is that we know that it happens on a seasonal calendar. We know there are, X amount of game days. There'll be a result at the end of every day. There'll be signings. It's a bit of it's a cyclical kind of seasonal calendar. So it's definitely a bit easier in this industry compared to other industries where we've got a bit of a calendar and a bit of forward planning in terms of what's going to happen. We don't actually know the result of what's going to happen, but we know that there are going to be that many game days, for example. Are brands coming from your experience, are brands coming with, I want to post every week, I want it to be on game day kind of direction? Or are there some brands and teams now working more in, the ad hoc space where it's like, we know that we want to partner with you. We know we want to partner with you across a full season. We don't really want to specify exactly what that looks like, but we want to, trust. I think back to your point, like we want to trust the content you can create. We want to trust the audience. We know that the audience is aligned and we know that our brands are aligned. So let's just see how it plays out. How many instances or how often do you think that's happening in sport as opposed to the, regimented, 7 p.m. before kickoff, you get a post type executions?
Yeah. So there are certain things that are asked for very commonly. I would say a lot of brands will ask for game day. They've just want an asset that runs on game day. So I think that's a piece. Player arrivals are huge, especially with the tie to the fashion industry. Being part of that moment is asked for a lot. I think they don't want to see logo slaps. Logo slap is, hey, no logo slaps is one of the most common things I see in a brief. We don't want to see it. They don't want that happening. And I think the good news on that front is you can overcome that very, very easily. What feels like a logo slap is like when you cannot see the connection between the content and the brand. It doesn't mean we don't want turnkey content. I think that's a little bit of a misconception. So all it takes is saying, hey, Kroger, a grocery store chain, we want to put you on player arrivals. And it's like, well, what do they have to do with each other? Well, if you call them fresh fit arrivals and you can tie into their fresh produce that they're pumping as their tagline on their channels, you've now created the tie without actually having to change the content at all. And you've taken what might be considered a logo slap into something that's super beneficial, right? So I think no logo slaps is a big one. And then we kind of talked about it a little earlier, but they want to go deeper. They want to see if there is a physical product, they'd love to see opportunities where their products are in there. They want to see storytelling. That's a huge buzzword. We want storytelling around our product. So it comes down to creativity and bringing that to life. And I think what will break down a lot of doors in that process is I think rights holders see sponsored content different from unsponsored content. Teams will say things like, oh, we want to keep it organic. It's like, It's all organic social content. If you treat unsponsored content and sponsored content the same, you're going to achieve the best results, right? Because the only difference is an added layer of reviews. But ultimately, like, you want to serve your audience with the best content possible. So you just need to find a creative solution into how to integrate a brand into an authentic moment.
Speaking about that creativity and the coming up with creative solutions and really treating content the same, whether it's sponsored or unsponsored, what role and where do they kind of fit within the business? Do the creatives play?
Yeah, they play a huge role. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I feel for content and creative teams, right? You are constantly being asked for ideas when it comes to partnerships, and you're part of a group that supports every single department in an organization. So partnerships is asking you for ideas, even though that's just one department of all the departments that they support. So it's really, really difficult. But look, the more time you spend, the better the ideas, the happier you're going to be on the back end. Like I talked about how many details you need to be providing up front. That's more work up front. That is asking a lot more questions of what's our goals, what's the best channels, how many times is not just enough, but what's too much? Like, what's that balance? And truly understanding how something's going to be activated. And the people who are executing it know that information best. So even if you have someone who is a digital partnerships specialist on your team, even if you have that person, the creative teams will inform what is feasible in terms of activation. Like, is it possible to do an all access series that runs weekly? Maybe you have to pull it back to monthly because they let you know you're not staffed for that. Or they say you can run it weekly, but we need to outsource and it's going to cost us this much to help assist, right? So creatives are incredibly important. One, they're going to know what the audience really, really wants. They're going to understand feasibility, and they can provide the details necessary to have a true understanding of what it takes to bring something to life.
Yeah, it's such an important partnership, and it's probably one we see neglected a little bit, and there tends to be a fair amount of friction there. And I think the friction exists not because solely because of disagreement, but I think everyone's in kind of their own silos, and creative team are like trying to be really creative and just focus on doing that. The partnerships team are trying to bring in more revenue and make their partners happy. A little bit of time spent together will kind of take those walls down and remove some of that friction and help those teams kind of get on the same wavelength. Have you seen any examples where teams have really done that well, where their partnerships team or their sales team and their creative team are like working hand in hand?
Yeah, I definitely have. I mean, here's kind of where the breakdown happens overall. You've got partnerships teams that don't understand digital. So they're going out and they're selling things that just are not from someone who's like digitally native's mind. So all the ideas that are being come up with, they're just not thinking about the nuances of how things come to life on digital channels. On the flip side, we just talked about it, content teams don't have the time to constantly be brainstorming ideas. So the partnerships team is now upset because they're not getting ideas at a fast enough rate. So you're having those things combat, and then everybody just doesn't like each other. It creates a terrible environment. And that is the most common problem you see across sport. The teams that are doing it best are people who are hiring people specifically for digital partnerships. It is a full-time job, whether it's coming up with ideas, helping in activation, pre-sale, just like putting together materials, getting approvals across departments. Teams like the Atlanta Falcons, right? I think they're the only team who has someone in senior leadership with a digital partnerships title, but they have multiple people who are focusing on that. That's across, the Falcons and Atlanta United. The Chicago Bulls, I came out of that coaching tree. The Chicago Bulls they have the same ownership as the Chicago White Sox. They were kind of brought over a little bit to build the digital partnerships program there. They've had people focused on digital partnerships for a long time before I even got into the business, and in doing that. So teams that really have those positions in place are the ones that are going to thrive and really make things easier.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how we continue to talk about still, and even in the last, 10 years that we've been in the space as well, how structure affects
everything in a business, and how, we're always like, oh, the CEO doesn't understand, or, there's no chief marketing officers, or there's no, digital partnerships managers and things like that. And how that still seems to be a bit of a lag well into the second decade of digital partnerships and digital activation. So when does structure catch up, and when does that become the new norm? And we're not kind of having these conversations where it's like, we don't have the right people in the right positions. We don't have people who are focusing on this. We have partnerships managers who don't understand digital. It's almost like, when do we catch up? When does it become the flip side? And it's like, actually, we've got people who understand digital way too much, and we're actually finding it hard to sell traditional media because the market's caught up. So when do our structures catch up? And I think sport is a particularly good example of where there are people working, in the trends and innovation at a really low level, but it takes a long time for it to filter through to an executive level, for that to be a seamless execution. So I'm waiting for that time where it's just like, these CEOs and GMs are basically digital natives, and we don't have to have these conversations about, breakdown of understanding and education. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge and a trend I'm not loving seeing, but a lot of what's coming is the hires focused on digital partnerships mostly are happening at the coordinator and manager levels. Would love to see more representation who have more power with senior leadership, people who are empowered to kind of stand up and fight for what the team needs and what the departments need, both on the partnership side and on the content side, right? That person is supposed to be an advocate for multiple departments. So that would be good. But look, if I come in here and tell you, hey, hire someone in digital partnerships, that's the solution. I haven't done my job. It's not good enough. So I think a key also for content teams is really understanding the value that it brings to them by embracing sponsored content, right? Like, what is in it for you? So what I tell content teams is you need to be more selfish, like truly be more selfish, because ultimately the money you bring in from sponsorship is the language you can speak to your CMO to hire more people, buy more equipment, outsource more, get a promotion, get a raise. Like, understanding how you're impacting the bottom line for your organization is going to give you a ton of power in your personal career or for your department. So like, that's why you should embrace it. And if you're able to kind of carve out some structure in doing so, like, you can really help your team and even your own career.
Yeah, Ryan preaches that a lot, I think.
Super valuable tips there.
I was just going to say, because that's exactly the line that you preach a lot in terms of, why would content creators who don't get to see, we don't get we don't get like a commission or anything on selling these ideas from a content perspective, and we're actually, tasked with executing it a lot, but there feels like there's no real benefit to them in the immediate term. So I love that point that you made, Alex, and Ryan does it a lot here locally as well. But what can we unlock, and what can we work to as a executional team to be able to in sponsored content? What can it unlock if we do a really good job here, and if we sell more of this stuff in? What can we get as a team to be able to help us? Is it resource? Is it bonuses? Is it some other incentives? Is it, whatever it looks like? But how do we make sure that the revenue that's coming through from a sponsored content point of view is realized across the whole business, whether that's monetary or non-monetary? And I really love that you've made that point there, because it's definitely something that I hear Ryan speak of a lot in the local market as well.
Yeah, the good news is the demand is there from brands. They want digital. Like, it isn't an issue of whether brands understand that digital matters. The demand is there. It's just that it's really hard to come up with the ideas and bring it to life for rights holders. They're really struggling, and to the point where process and internal relationships, they're not great, and they don't want to deal with it. Like, it is a hassle to do, but that's not for a lack of opportunity.
Let's kind of change gears off the back of that. We've spoken a little bit about structures and processes. Let's talk about some examples of really great sponsored content that you've seen. Like, give us a few examples where you just amazed by the content that has been produced from a sponsored content perspective.
Yeah, happy to. I think if I had to give someone a championship belt for this season, it's Liverpool. Liverpool has crushed sponsored content this year. So, I mean, a couple examples with them immediately come to mind. Their partnership renewal with Carlsberg Beer was outstanding. They created a custom piece. I think they had a fan in a tattoo parlor, and they're getting a tattoo, and it becomes animated, and you see just like Carlsberg that used to be a front of shirt sponsor back in the day, showing some like Liverpool highlights on someone's arm in a tattoo form. It turns into beer. You could see the whole thing. So like it was really eye catching in that partnership renewal announcement. But what I really think took it over the top was that they then created a content series called Inked, all about players' tattoos, that was sponsored by Carlsberg as well. So it wasn't just a single moment in time, but they really stretched it with that content series out into a larger kind of platform beyond that moment. So I think they have done an incredible job on that front. I mean, we saw in the NFL draft very recently, New Era with their hats in the NFL draft. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, especially with product integration. When you think about in the NFL, when a player is drafted, they walk up to the stage, they put on their new team hat, and then they go and shake the commissioner's hand. So the NFL set up a camera by where the players would grab their new team hat, and they had a mirror to put it on. And so they looked into the camera, they put on their hat, they kind of smiled and like had a good time with the moment, and they walked off. So they used those clips in partnership with New Era to have a draft cam and part of an authentic moment that's happening at the draft, whether there's a sponsor or not, right? That's the gold standard. So the NFL did a really great job. Liverpool does a great job. And then McLaren in F1, having an outstanding season. I just feel like their concepts are so creative. I think they shot a piece of sponsored content with Hilton in their spa. That was really great. And then they worked with Google Pixel as well after Lando Norris's win in Miami, just creating some outstanding moments, just like selfies using a Google Pixel phone. And they had done some stuff with the Larry O'Brien Trophy earlier that week on a Google Pixel, which is a mutual NBA partner. So they really have done an outstanding job as well. But I think it all comes down to what is fan first and what is serving the fan. And those are just some great examples that have stood out to me this year.
Awesome. That's some great examples from like across the board, across different sports. What about specific teams or leagues across the globe that are doing sponsored content really well, and who people should be who are working in the industry should be following?
Yeah. Look, we said Liverpool and McLaren. Wrexham is a great one. I think they really proved themselves with that HP activation and just showing they're more than just their celebrity owners. Even though I think if you got it, flaunt it, like use any comparative advantage that you have. But some of my favorites, Philadelphia Eagles, doing an outstanding job in the NFL. I mean, they had a partnership with Sleep Number, and where a lot of times where you'll see like mattress companies come in and say, we really just want players talking about the benefits of sleep, and that's the content that they get. They created a week in the life of Lane Johnson, their offensive lineman, who is very popular with fans and is honestly the most physical position in the sport, right? So they took you through the end of one game all the way through the next week, an all access kind of like show of that through to the next game. So you got to see his workout routine, his recovery, and in like little 15-second spurts, he'd talk about the importance of sleep and his recovery early in the week. Then like later in it, he talked about, here are the actual features that I really like about Sleep Number. But they kept it short and they dispersed it throughout and came up with a super creative piece. So the Philadelphia Eagles, for one, Kansas City Chiefs are also crushing it as well as the Buffalo Bills. I'll get off the NFL. NBA, I think Golden State Warriors, Chicago Bulls, Boston Celtics. I mean, they're just, in terms of teams that I mentioned most, they come up a lot. And then in baseball and hockey, I would say in hockey, the Vancouver Canucks. I've really admired their ability to create larger campaigns. I think they created a really cool campaign with Roberto Luongo and honoring him and his time with the team, which was super creative. They came up with a great campaign for schedule release recently called Nuckflix that I thought was really good, but they're a team that really does big campaigns well. And then in MLB, the Toronto Blue Jays, I mean, I don't know what's in the water over there, but they took a huge leap this year. I think they've done an outstanding job with their graphics package. If you take a look at it, I feel like every sponsor fits the content of what they're doing. Particularly take a look at their Instagram stories, because you got Shell, like performer of the game. They've got a whole like PB&J double plays, celebrating a refreshing celebration with Canada Dry. So they have done a ton of stuff. And then I can't forget the Seattle Seahawks. I wrote a whole piece about them, but between their throwback jersey campaign that they did with Microsoft and kind of like uploading onto AOL at the beginning of the year, and then just the way they have just crushed with Instagram stories and made them super interactive for their partners, they're a team to watch as well.
Yeah, the Seattle Seahawks piece, our audience loved that. We had multiple people reach out to us and say how much they love the inclusion of that piece of content in our newsletter. So thank you for that, because that was written and developed by yourself. We're also big fans of the Seahawks, and we loved their slightly different approach to their schedule release this year. Was really cool.
Alex, I'd love to quickly just get your opinion as well on you've worked across teams and you're at the Arena Group and now as well. So, traditionally sponsored content was, very much from a team point of view. Can we get in with X, Y, and Z team? But that is the landscape of sports commercialization is so much broader now. There are venues, stadiums, athletes. Teams, leagues, there's so many people, there's so many touch points across sport that can be commercialized. What's your, take on how that's changed the way that brands are interacting? Do you think that they obviously still want to be at a team level first and foremost, but have you seen the spread and the landscape kind of just grow and grow and grow, and the opportunities for brands just be so much more expansive in what they're able to tap into from a sporting point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it expands into athletes, and the explosion of athlete-driven podcasts, it can't be missed over the last few years. It is the perfect time to be in that space, and quite frankly, social channels right now are just tailor-made for, let's create a long-form piece of content and then chop it into clips and post it on social media, because Reels, Shorts, TikTok, you don't need followers to get reach, and they're showing it to new people all the time. So like whether it's a podcast or just long-form content that can be chopped down, like that's super beneficial. And that's really where, athletes are winning. They're really winning in the podcast space right now. But then I even think beyond that, I think into the creator space. Good runs a live golf tournament, I think on the same weekend as the Waste Management Open. They live stream it on YouTube and get over 1 million views. I mean, that is unheard of. So I think it's the creator space as well. I mean, you see it with the Sidemen, right? And their charity tournament and much more of what they've done. And they've done some outstanding stuff. Dude Perfect, John Boy, like these are all creators in the sports space as well. So I think it's the big trend is, yes, athletes, which has been around forever, but I think creators cannot be discounted as part of the sports industry.
Yeah, we love that. We're definitely seeing that play out here a little bit as well. And definitely advocates for that, for brands being able to tap into, those that are already engaging with their audience, people who, that create people trust creators and they trust what they're saying and they trust that they, being really authentic with them and they've built this brand trust with them for over a period of time. So when sponsors come in and they're able to tap into that, the audience is already there, the love is already there, the passion is already there, and it's really hard to replicate at a team level, I feel. And even at an athlete level, sometimes as well, given how many restrictions they've got around them. So I think the creator space is definitely one that that people can think outside the box in and brands can try and think about how they can align a lot more in that space. Because, yeah, as you said, like, you don't need followers to get reach in some instances, but you do need, kind of a strong understanding about what the audience wants and creating good content there.
Yeah, and honestly, creators are a really good asset for both teams, for the rights holders, and for brands, right? Especially when you see teams that, hey, they might not be able to activate a brand message at a certain time because you're a baseball team and you got games every single day and you just can't get that right moment to squeeze in a message. I think of the Chicago Cubs, and they had two partners kind of work together. They had Home Run In and Garrett Popcorn. They did a collab to create like pizza flavored popcorn. It was being served exclusively at Wrigley Field over the course of a homestand in the early part of this month. And they used creators to get that message out. And the Cubs did share it to their channels, but they used a bunch of local food influencers to get that message out there and get content created for them on their channels as well as creator channels and get that message out. So creators can be an outstanding option to leverage the assets you have in a partnership, but also have another voice to help bring it to the table when your rights holder may not be able to do it in the best way possible.
What about just kind of touching on the point of like different mediums or different channels that brands and rights holders can think about? What about the rise in like publishers? Like you mentioned John Boy Media earlier. What are publishers able to bring to the table from a sponsored content perspective?
Yeah, in a case like a John Boy, in a case like a Dude Perfect, something like that, I think that their community that they've built is outstanding. And that's not to say rights holders haven't done that already, but I mean, John Boy, for example, they retain 90% of partners. 1 and 2 use an offer from their brand partners. And that's because, what they do really well is they've built this strong community. And when the brands come to them and let them dictate what the content is. So they're letting the creators dictate the content and kind of come up with the ideas and come up with the integrations and let their creativity fly, right? They've kind of proven themselves in the space. Their fans celebrate that. They're like, oh, you've done so well that these sponsors are coming on. We want to know how we can help. We want to redeem these offers to support you, right? So I think they've got almost an added level because it's a little bit more person-to-person connection with their community. Rather, a team, don't get me wrong, strong connection. It's why you should be in sports sponsorship. But that creator level is a little bit closer, and I think their communities really, really come to the forefront and advocate for them in those partnerships.
The landscape is changed so much, and the power of some of those publishers and even athletes and creators as well has changed so significantly over the last kind of 5 to 10 years. The accessibility of content, the nature of social has really impacted some of the more traditional assets of rights holders, like highlights and things that are a little bit more exclusive. They at least don't feel as important as they used to be because there's so many other avenues of content creation and engaging and building an audience than there ever was. Do you see the same thing, Alex?
I think that having that accessibility just means you got to step your game up, right? You got to be more creative. You got to show your work more. Like, why are you making the recommendation of a certain content series specifically for that brand? You can't just say, hey, you're just going to sponsor our highlights. Like, that's it. Like, your logo is going to be on it for a few seconds and away we go. You got to just bring more. You got to show that alignment. Whether it's a great name or it's product integration or it aligns with a marketing timeline that they have, or you really feel like it can generate leads or traffic for a brand. Like, you really have to explain why it works. Brands are super open. They're super receptive to ideas, but they need to be educated on what works and why it works. And so I think it's a good thing. I think it just means that we all have to kind of raise the bar of the ideas we're delivering.
Love that. Let's raise the bar together. We are nearly done. So it'd be great just to, before we kind of finish up, any tips or any areas in the space of sponsored content, especially for the Australians listening in, that people should start to be thinking about or should be doubling down on?
Yeah, I think an important thing to understand internally at organizations is the role in which sponsored content plays, right? It all starts, the reason brands are coming and they want to be a part of your digital channels is because you have built this large, highly engaged audience. Like that is the thing that you have done really well. And that's why people want to pay to be a part of that for the attention that you've captured. With those dollars that you bring in, you have more opportunity to create bigger and better things. And with that opportunity, you can grow the audience even more. You can create better content. You can raise the bar, right? You can create cooler things, bring your dreams to life, right? On the content side, it's like, think of what you could never do before. Now we have the cash to pay for it. On the partnership side, it's like, we've got this amazing team that's built this audience. Let's fan the flames of that and help it grow. So when you kind of bring those bigger dreams to life, it increases the audience even more, which brings more opportunity, right? It is a partnerships flywheel that you are creating with the organization. So partnerships and content, they need to be on the same page. And while there are tough relationships, like you got to break down those walls and you have to work together because ultimately, like everyone can win. Content teams get more resources, partnerships teams sell more deals, but it's not just sell more deals, they renew more partners because they're getting better things delivered to their brands, right? So that's the biggest thing. It's not just about how much we sell, but have we made partners happy to the point where they want to renew and you don't have to worry as much about hitting a certain budget every year.
That's probably the best summary I've heard of sponsored content. So we're going to definitely package that little one up, deliver that nugget to our audience, and hopefully they play it on repeat over and over again.
You know, it's a big opportunity. I love it. It's strange that this is where my passions have led me in my career, but sponsored content, like social media has been around forever. I mean, Cass, you talked about it, right? Like we're going on 2 decades and it's still in its infancy, which is wild to me, but it just means there's a ton of opportunity. So, I mean, there's just too many examples out there, and you can subscribe to the newsletter to find out. But there's too many examples to say sponsored content doesn't work. Fans don't want to see brands. That's just BS. It's not true. And so there's great examples every day. And quite frankly, like the more creative you are with solutions, the more you're going to succeed and the more you're going to help yourself and drive, more money for your partners and for your own team.
So great. So great. Well, on that note, I think we can definitely sense your passion, and we definitely love all the stuff you're putting out. And as you said, people can, follow you on LinkedIn and get all these nuggets of insights themselves. But we've loved talking to you. This is definitely not the last that we've seen of you on our podcast. Hopefully, we'd love to continue to work with you further and make sure that we're giving, as much information, as much research, insights and analysis to sponsored content as we can in the local market, because what you're doing over there in the US is absolutely amazing and we love it. And, thank you so much for giving up your time today to come and chat with us on Art of the Game. We know that the audience will get so much from this. And as we said, it's not the last that we'll see of you, hopefully. So we'd love to have you back. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for all the amazing insights that you've given us today.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to be back. And for anyone who's listening and they just want to talk about this more, feel free to send me a message and happy to set up some time.
Love it.
What a legend. Thank you. Thank you again, Alex. Cheers.
Bye.